Good morning, Calvary. I'm Stephanie Stolhammer, and I'd like to welcome you to our online worship service this morning. Thank you for joining us. If you're new with us here at Calvary, you can go to calvarychurchwalker.org to get connected with us. And if you've already been connected with us and you'd like to join a small group or get serving, you can find that on the website as well. It's a great way to get connected with the people here. And then with that, tonight at the Faith House from 6 to 7, there's an elder prayer night. You can do that in person or on Zoom. And then coming up next week, we have a Good Friday service, April 7th, at 7 p.m. And then we have on Sunday, April 9th, our Easter services will be 9 and 10:30 a.m. And then also April 16th, we have a baptism service coming up. It will be after church. If you have questions about that, just talk to Pastor Mark. And just with that, I'll hand it over to the worship team. Thank you.
Hear the sound
At this moment, I'd like to take a moment to pray for our offering. If you'd like to give, you can go to calvarychurchwalker.org to give there, or you can mail it into the church. You can stop by the church and drop it off here, just whatever works best for you. So with that, let's pray. Dear Lord, thank you for this wonderful day. Just thank you for just this time that we can worship you, just that we can hear your word. Just thank you for everything that you give to us. Just thank you that everything we have, you've given to us. I pray that you'd open our hearts to give back to you what's already yours. Just thank you again for who you are and for all that you do. I just pray these things in your name, Jesus. Amen.
Hello, sisters and brothers in Christ. I'm pleased to be with you today. My name is Stephen Ware. I'm glad to share a message with you. I hope it'll encourage you and challenge you as it has encouraged me and challenged me as I have contemplated God's word for us. I also pray that this day finds you resting in God and that you are enjoying his presence. That was one of the takeaways from Nabil's message last week, that he encouraged us to find ways to simply enjoy God. I have a mental image for this that I've used for a long time. It works for me. It might not be what you would think of, but it works for me. And it's the wrong time of year, but this is what I think when I think of enjoying the presence of God. I think of autumn time. I imagine autumn time when the leaves are falling off the trees and they're on the ground. And each one of these leaves, as it floats down and it arrives on the ground, it's like God's love note to us. It's a note of him. And these different notes represent people. They represent kindnesses that I've experienced. They've represented encouragement from our neighbors and our loved ones. Some of them represent the loving admonishment or correction or chastening from God. But most of them to me, represent specific acts of forgiveness for me from God. That these leaves that are showering down on us, they represent God's blessing and goodness and forgiveness. And as I rake all of these leaves up into this pile, it's like I'm raking up all of the blessings that God has given me. I rake them into a giant pile as high as it can go, and then I do what every self-respecting kid does. I run and I jump in them and I roll in them and I hoot and holler and I just enjoy this feeling, basking in the goodness of God. And then I'll gather them up again and jump in them again and laugh and shout continually as I go. So after a while, I would get tired and I get exhausted from this celebration of God's goodness. And then all I want to do is one last time pile them up and just lay down on my back, look up at the sky, look through the ends of the trees, and rest in the presence of God and breathe deeply the joy of God. And this joy, sometimes it smells a little bit like wood smoke. Sometimes it smells a little bit like cut grass, or sometimes it smells a little bit like decomposing leaves. This is the smell in my image, the smell of peace, the smell of God's presence in the warm sunshine on a beautiful fall day. Your image, of course, of joy may look a little bit different. It may have fewer ticks and it may have fewer allergens, but I hope that you have some image, some place that you can go to in your mind where you can just rest in the presence of God and simply enjoy him. Now, maintaining that joy, of course, can be a struggle. It is for me, and it was for the people of Israel as well. It is very clearly seen in the events of Holy Week that we're going to consider now. Today we commemorate Palm Sunday, and the biblical record indicates that it was quite a celebration filled with hosannas and blessed is he. And the text from Luke chapter 19, verses 28 through 40, reads like this. After telling this story, and that is the parable of the talents, which Jesus had just told, Jesus went on toward Jerusalem, walking ahead of his disciples. As he came to the towns of Bethphage and Bethany on the Mount of Olives, he sent 2 disciples ahead. Go into that village over there, he told them. After you enter it, you will see a young donkey tied there that no one has ever ridden. Untie it and bring it here. If anyone asks, why are you untying that colt? Just say, the Lord needs it. So they went and they found the colt just as Jesus had said. And sure enough, as they were untying it, the owners asked them, why are you untying that colt? And the disciples simply replied, the Lord needs it. So they brought the colt to Jesus and threw their garments over it for him to ride on. As he rode along, the crowd spread out their garments on the road ahead of him. When he reached the place where he had started down the Mount of Olives, all of his followers began to shout and sing as they were walking along, praising God for all the wonderful miracles they had seen. Blessings on the King who comes in the name of the Lord. Peace in heaven and glory in the highest heaven. But some of the Pharisees among the crowd said, Teacher, rebuke your followers for saying things like that. He replied, If they keep quiet, the stones along the road will burst into cheers. Let's pray together. Mighty God, teach us your word that we might walk in your way, shouting blessings on the King who comes in the name of the Lord. Peace in heaven and glory in highest heaven. Teach us to enjoy you and celebrate you. Write your words on our hearts. Thank you for your blessings, your faithfulness, and your power. In Jesus' name, amen. So we see this picture of the events of Palm Sunday, and we can wonder, why were the people of Jerusalem cheering? Why were they so excited that some teacher from some backwater town coming into Jerusalem, why was this such a big deal? It was a high holiday. Surely they had other things that they could do. But Luke, our biblical writer, the physician and the researcher, tells us, even in the days before social media, Jesus had developed quite a reputation and quite a following. He had a lot of followers and he got a lot of likes, and Luke tells us why. All of Jesus' followers began to shout and sing as they walked along, praising God for all the wonderful miracles they had seen. They had seen miracles. That changes somebody, by the way. They had seen miracles. They had seen food multiplied. They had seen lepers healed. They had seen the lame walk and blind men see. They had even seen the dead raised. That will get attention. But why would they care about all of this previous stuff? Why would that cause such excitement? Why would it matter to them? I mean, those wonderful miracles, of course, were exciting. And they were surprising. They spoke of Jesus' power, and the people were expecting more based on what they had already experienced. It gave them hope. The people developed expectations based on what they had already seen and heard. And the people developed very big expectations. But they took joy from that. They had hope in that. Inaccurate expectations, however, are among the real joy killers in my life and in the lives of lots of people that I know, and I think in the lives of these people in the story as well. So, for example, how many of you have had a friend talk up a movie or a TV show or a book and tell you about it and say, you're going to love this, you're going to love this, and then when you experience it, you think, what in the world was my friend thinking? Why do they think it's so great? And why in the world would they think that I would like it? Has that happened to you? It certainly has happened to me. When people build something up, our expectation can be so great that it would be impossible for that book or show or movie to meet that expectation. I have, by the way, and I don't know if you might have experienced this too, seen a movie that I didn't really like that much the first time because my expectations were so high, and watched it again sometime later, and then decided, you know what, that really was pretty good. It might be that my expectations affect my interpretation or my experience. So here's another expectation difficulty, and this is another one that I think all of us have experience with, and that is buying stuff online. Have you ever bought anything online, and then when you got it in the mail, it just really wasn't what you were thinking? It wasn't what you were expecting? Like the donut maker machine that I got for one of my sons last Christmas. You know, you see it online and it looks like this big thing that you plunge in, it comes out in the dough and you put it in the frying oil and you get these beautiful donuts, but it looks big. But when we got it in the mail, it was in this little box, and you can't even fit like 3 donuts worth of batter in this donut maker thing. So, son, I'm sorry. I thought it was going to be a lot bigger than that. Another is the jacket that I'm wearing right now. And I understand that in the video, it might look kind of brown. But in different light, it looks really green. And I kind of knew that I was buying green, but this looks different. It's not exactly what I was expecting. It's a different kind of green than what I was thinking. And it's corduroy, and the cords are so small that it actually looks and feels more like velvet. And I'm just not a velvet jacket kind of guy. So I got this in the mail, and it was absolutely not what I was expecting. Maybe when I wore it, I thought it would make me look 20 years younger or 20 pounds lighter, and neither of those things happened, even though the guy online who was wearing it was both of those things. In any case, I'm not sure quite how I feel about the jacket, other than I'm wearing it now, and I guess that's mine now. And so don't be surprised if you see it at Christmas time or on St. Patrick's Day. I don't know how much else it will be worn. Maybe, I don't know. I haven't decided yet. It's just not what I was expecting. All of this is to say that expectations can lead to disappointment, even when what we experience is good. So the people of Israel were cheering for Jesus as he entered Jerusalem on a donkey because their expectations based on what they had seen and heard. They expected him to perform more miracles. They wanted to see it. I would want to see it. But they also expected him to liberate them politically. They did call him king. They called him king. Blessings on the king who comes in the name of the Lord. Peace in heaven and glory in highest heaven, they shouted. They expected a new king who would take earthly dominion over Israel and who would change the social order and who would expel the Romans from the Holy Land. They expected a conqueror and a liberator. They expected someone who would save them from Rome and hunger and disease and maybe even from death. They had very particular hopes and expectations, and they welcomed Jesus to the Passover feast based on those expectations. And they shouted and sang with joy, Hosanna in the highest. Of course, not everyone was filled with joy. There were also people who were looking to kill Jesus, to destroy this dangerous uprising. Luke records that some of the Pharisees among the crowd said, "Teacher, rebuke your followers for saying things like that." Basically, they were commanding and or begging him to say that he isn't the king. It's interesting, though, how they address him. It's interesting that they call him teacher. I'm wondering why would they do that? Why would they use that term of respect? Why not just, "Hey, you guy on the donkey, knock it off"? Instead, they call him teacher. Were they simply afraid of the crowd? Well, we know that they were afraid of the crowd. They were concerned about what the crowd would think or what they would do. And some of the Pharisees were surely just really angry and wanted him to publicly state that he is not the king. I wonder, though, if some of the Pharisees, any of them who may have been sympathetic to Jesus, as Nicodemus was, if they were saying, rebuke them in a loud whisper, just trying to say, let's stay out of trouble here. Can we avoid this confrontation? Pleading with him to say something to avoid trouble and continue his ministry. We don't know what everyone's motives were, but we do know how Jesus responded. Jesus replied, if they kept quiet, if the people kept quiet, the stones along the road would burst out in cheers. they would burst out in cheers. Basically, Jesus was saying, I won't stop this. And in fact, there's nothing I can do about it. I cannot deny the truth. I will not deny the truth. So by receiving these praises, Jesus is making his clearest, strongest, most public claim that he is the one they have been waiting for. He is the King who comes in the name of the Lord. This is actually quite an acknowledgement, and it brings with it a lot of expectations. The people are cheering. The disciples are walking proudly with their exalted teacher. Everything seems terrific. This is what they've all been waiting for. It's a pretty good day so far. You'd think that everyone except the religious leaders would be pretty happy at this point. But there is another person who's not happy. He's not happy. And when we continue to read the account, in verses 41 through 44, we learn, and this is not what I was expecting. It's not what I would expect. This is what Luke writes. As Jesus came closer to Jerusalem and saw the city ahead, he began to weep. Jesus is weeping. And then Jesus says, how I wish today that you of all people would understand the way of peace. Remember that they had just been shouting, peace in heaven. And Jesus continues, but now it's too late. Peace is hidden from your eyes. Before long, your enemies will build ramparts against your walls and encircle you and close in on you from every side. They will crush you into the ground and your children with you. Your enemies will not leave a single stone in place because you did not recognize it when God visited you. It sounds like Jesus is raining on his own parade here. What is he trying to say? I mean, how do we interpret this? If we were in that audience shouting the hosannas and the blessings, if we had been there, how would we interpret this? Isn't Jesus the conquering deliverer? Isn't he the one who will protect the people of Jerusalem with his miraculous power? And instead, he says, others will crush you into the ground and your children with you. He's weeping while he says it. But isn't he mighty enough to present it? To prevent it? That is not what we were expecting. It's not what I would have been expecting. Continuing in verses 45 and 46, we read, then Jesus entered the temple and began to drive out the people selling animals for sacrifices. He said to them, the scriptures declare, my temple will be a house of prayer, but you have turned it into a den of thieves. Hang on a second. Again, putting myself in that time, in that place, I'm thinking, wait, he's not attacking the Romans. He's attacking our religious and economic systems. The animal sellers, yes, they are overcharging and exploiting us, but without them, we can't offer sacrifices to get right with God. Does he really have time for this? Does he know what he's doing? Does he know who the real enemy is? This is not what we were expecting. Well, Jesus had had a busy day. He had gotten a lot of attention. He had gotten a lot of people pretty excited, and he had gotten a lot of the religious leaders and those who had been profiting from the system of temple sacrifices pretty angry. Different people had a wide range of expectations based on what had happened that day. We're told in the final two verses in this chapter, verses 47 and 48, after that, Jesus taught daily in the temple. But the leading priests, the teachers of religious law, and the other leaders of the people began planning how to kill him. But they could think of nothing because all the people hung on every word he said. As the events of what we call Holy Week transpired, Jesus continued not to meet the people's expectations as the conquering hero. On multiple occasions, he continued to embarrass the religious leaders. He said that people should pay their taxes to Rome. What? He predicted the destruction of the temple and wars and persecution and the fall of Jerusalem. Excuse me? He continues to make statements suggesting that he is divine rather than just a miracle-working prophet. This is not what people expected. We often hear that actions have consequences, and that is certainly true, but expectations also have consequences. One of the events, very memorable events from my time living in China, was when the leaders of the university where we were working, where Nola and Gabriel and I were, they wanted to do something special for the foreign faculty around American Thanksgiving time. And while there were people from all over the world, the majority of us there were from the United States. And so they wanted to make a traditional American Thanksgiving meal. And they actually did. They made a tremendously good one with turkey, which is really hard to get in China, actually, and mashed potatoes and gravy and stuffing and veggies and all of the things that you just really enjoy, everything we could hope for. And that meal exceeded my expectations. Now, I expected it to be good, but I didn't expect it to taste very much like home. And they made it happen, and it was marvelous. While we were having dinner, though, many of us were also eyeing the dessert table, where we saw a pan of beautiful chocolate bar cookies, all glossy and chocolatey on top. And of course, I didn't need dessert, but I wasn't not going to have dessert. So I got a piece of one of these chocolate cookies, and I put it in my mouth with anticipation and expectation. And the problem was that it wasn't chocolate. I mean, it looked like chocolate. It looked all beautiful and chocolatey on top, but it wasn't chocolate. Everything else we had been served was an American-style food, but as this sugary, sweet, starchy, red bean taste rolled around my tongue, I thought to myself, this is not what I expected. And I couldn't finish it. So sadly, I contributed to the pile of it in the garbage can. And I want to point out that it's not that red bean paste is bad or wrong. It's not my favorite, but if I grew up with it, I might think it's marvelous. The problem was, it wasn't chocolate. The problem was, I didn't expect it. My expectations weren't met, and the red bean cookie met with an inglorious end. Expectations matter, and they have consequences. So, as you've probably considered before, some of the people welcoming Jesus to Jerusalem, who were shouting the hosannas and who were shouting the blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, who were shouting these welcomes, just 5 days later, some of them were shouting, crucify him, crucify him. What changed? Well, how it is that we turn our hearts when our expectations aren't met. Jesus knew this, and he wept, and he wasn't enraged at the people. He anguished over them. The people wanted someone who could save their nation, but they needed someone who could save their souls. So, as the verses in the book of Jagger and Richards says, you can't always get what you want. But if you try sometimes, well, you just might find you get what you need. Now, I know that some of you are going to have that earworm in your head for at least a little while. I'm hearing the boys' choir in the background right now. But it really sends an interesting message. The people of Jerusalem did not get what they wanted, but they got what they needed. They got what they truly, desperately, deeply needed. And it was actually more than what they expected. It was more. This is made most explicit on Good Friday, as recorded in Matthew chapter 27, verse 25, when the people gathered before Pilate calling for Jesus' crucifixion. And this blows my mind every time I read this verse. And the people shouted, "His blood shall be on us and on our children." And they didn't know what they were saying. They didn't know what they were asking for. They didn't know that they were pronouncing exactly what they needed. Because that is my prayer for myself, my prayer for my family, my prayer for all of us, that Jesus' blood would be on us and our children. It wasn't what they expected. None of the Passover celebration with Jesus happened as they expected. And yet, God's supreme and sublime will was done. Jesus did not come to free us from the troubles of the world while we remain in this world. He came to save us so that we can live differently here and now, and so that we can live with Him in His eternal kingdom in the world to come. So among the questions that I ask myself today, the ones that I reflect on are, what am I expecting? What am I looking for? How do I respond when things don't go as I expect them to? What in the world do I do with a green velvet sports jacket or a red bean dessert? I am certainly convicted that when it comes to my expectations of God, I fail in two really significant ways. The first is that I expect too little. I expect too little of Him. And the second is that I expect too specifically of Him. I need to return to a prayer that I did for many, many years as a part of my daily devotional, daily prayers. I would use phrases as I lifted up my friends and family before God. And I would ask God to do this. Bless them, I would say. Bless them. But bless them as you, Father, understand blessing, not according to my expectation. And then help me to see it. This is a prayer to which I need to return. Bless them as you understand blessing, not as I expect it. And help me to see it. All of us would do really well to grow in these two expectations. Expect God to do more. Expect God to do more than we could expect. I'm not sure how to expect more than we expect. I don't know how to say that better, but expect more. And the second, expect that it might look way, way different from what we expect. So on one hand, expect more, and then on the other hand, be more open. I need to be more open to what God has in mind. Expect that God's answers might look different from what we expect. If we can do these, we will be able to roll in the leaves in joy. We will be able to rest and bask in the pleasure of God's presence in a way that sometimes I struggle to do now. Let's contemplate these in the week ahead as we prepare to celebrate the resurrection of our Savior, taking joy in Him, being open to how He wants to orchestrate the events of the world, expecting more than we do now, and expecting that it might look different. Let's pray together. Bless us, Father God. Bless us as you understand blessing and not according to our expectation. Help us to recognize your goodness and your faithfulness. Help us to trust you more completely with our loved ones and our neighbors and our church family and our nation. Father, bless Pastor Mark, Pastor Ken, the elder board, ministry team members, as we walk with you and wait on you. Father, open our hearts and minds so that we would expect more from you and so that we would seek to agree with you rather than praying for your way, Lord. And may your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Amen. Amen.
How deep the Father's love for us, how vast beyond all measure, that he should give his only Son to make a wretch his treasure.